Good evening, everyone. I trust you're well. We're back with another journey planner, and this evening's session is going to be by Advent Farms. Earl from Advent Farms has taken the time out to give us, share us his story about how and why and what Advent Farms is, how they came about, what they were about, and why they came about. And don't forget, you can always find us on the website, which let me just bring it up on the screen so that you can see where you can find us. So you can find us at the Journey Planner or thejourneyplan.co.uk. That's our website, thejourneyplan.co.uk. You can also track us down on Facebook. You can see us at the Journey Planner SDA. And there you can see our past recordings. You may even be able to join live on the Journey Planner. And obviously, you can find us live on YouTube. And here we are broadcasting live at this moment in time. So you can find us on YouTube at thejourneyplanner.co. at the Journey Planner. So, and obviously, if you want more about Advent Farms, you can find them on their website, which is adventfarms.org. And there you'll be able to find out more information about what they do, what they provide, and all the various different resources and everything that they have available. So without further ado, I'll briefly introduce you to Earl. Earl, oops, I've lost my screen, bear with me. All right, that's better. Yeah, so Earl is originally from London, moved out of London some years ago. I cannot remember off the top of my head how many years ago you moved out of London, but it's been a while, and it's not straight to where they are now. It's been a bit of a journey, but they are up in just off the M1 around Northampton area, doing some farming stuff up there. We actually went up there just a little while ago, earlier today, to get some produce because the produce is good. It tastes good. So check out the website, and hey, if you're impressed to get some, feel free to reach out to them and try for yourself. As the Bible says, taste and see. So without further ado, let me hand you over to Earl to give us a bit more about who he is and to kick off this evening's session. And don't forget that there'll be a session after he does after he shares what he's going to share with us for some questions and answers, because I know a lot of you are interested in how to make the country living experience practical. How can you how to transition from city living to that country living, how to ensure that you're financially independent, not tied on your same type of employment that you may have been doing previously that you don't wish to carry on the other side, or you want a different way of doing things. So I'll allow Earl some time to answer questions that you may have that would tease out more of his experience that he may not have been covered directly in his presentation today. So Earl, if you'd like to give us a brief intro into who you are, and we'll go from there.
All right. Well, yeah, firstly, appreciate the time, and the plug-in you just gave there, Trevor. So yeah, again, my name is Earl Gale, and as you said, I'm over in Northamptonshire, originally from South London. It has been a number of years. Gosh, off the top of my head, I have to think about that one. I think it's about 13, 14 years now on this journey, so to speak. And as the title suggests, today we're going to give your audience an insight into what is Advent Farms, why has Advent Farms come into existence, and how did we begin a project like this. And I guess more importantly, on some level, how do we maintain a project of this magnitude, and not only maintain, but even continue to build and enhance its purpose. So these are the type of things that we want to, or the areas of discussion that we're going to get into. And I hope to bring light on this podcast, and by so doing, in some little way, hopefully meaningful, for those who might be contemplating in making such a move, whether on this scale, larger or smaller, but making some form of move. Hopefully what we might share here today, or what I might share here today, will be a glimmer of hope, as it were. So yeah, I'll just switch over to share my screen. Give me a moment. Let's click into that. Hopefully, okay, are you guys seeing my screen now?
You can see your screen, but not your slides. Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you see the slides now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, brilliant. Praise God. So we're going to begin with, again, as the title suggests, what is Advent Farms, why Advent Farms, and how did we begin Advent Farms? So we're going to begin with what is Advent Farms. Now, Advent Farms is a self-supporting ministry that utilizes, the blessings of fresh, nutritiously dense food as a means of building, relationships within the church and with the unchurched, rather. Relationships within the church, to create awareness of our need to learn practical skills in such things like growing our own food, would be an obvious one for Advent Farms, and becoming less reliant on an already, fragile, superficial food system that, by and large, contributes more to the deterioration of health than it does in bringing about, health and happiness in people's lives. So also skills like learning how to use the food that you learn how to grow packed with nutrients, learning how to use that food as a source of medicine, not only for health maintenance, but also for health restoration. And then most importantly, building relationships within and amongst church brethren that will allow, for conversations that will hopefully result in individuals becoming somewhat aroused to the solemn work of preparation. And we're getting to that in a little while. Ellen White describes it as coming upon the Lord's people, or coming upon the Lord's people with blinding force. We're to be preparing for such a time as that. Now, this preparation that I mentioned here, is it's multifaceted, and Advent Farms is basically dedicated in establishing an environment that will facilitate this work of preparation. But facilitating a holistic approach. Now, then when it comes to the, and I'd also mention this as well. I said about, we utilize the food to try and use it as a bridge, if you like, to build relationships within the church amongst fellow members, because not everyone is really, we're in church, but we're not really in church, if you get what I'm saying. And we, unfortunately, there's a lot of brethren that need to be, disturbed out of, the comfortable way we might live, and we need to become aroused to, to the time in which we're living in. So we use the food in terms of building up relationships with individuals to be able to then, start to have those conversations, start to, bring about the importance of the time which we're living in, and the necessity of becoming, people of action. Then with the unchurched, really the same sort of thing. We use, again, the food as that means of handshake to generate conversations within our local environment, within our local community, who might otherwise not necessarily be so willing to get straight into a conversation about salvation, right? For instance, I was in my local church. We're currently trying to build a church. So we currently rent a church from another Sunday church at the moment over in Rugby, to the church I belong to, and we've got a site and we're renovating that, or in the process of beginning the renovation. And there was a couple that walked past a few weeks ago when I was up there, just doing some work with an excavator, and they stopped me and they asked me, what's going on here? What do we have planned for the site? There was obviously, a couple that live local, an elderly couple as well. And so, I kind of said excitedly, we're going to be building a church, and it's in a little spot where you've got about another two churches. I think, I can't remember, one of them is a Jehovah's Witness hall. Anyway, there's two churches there. So this will make it the third. And the wife's response was, "Oh no, you're telling me another church?" And she was really kind of upset. It threw me a little bit. And the husband went on to say, you can't say nothing to her now, because basically she's just not into church. In fact, both of them are staunch atheists. So you've got people that live in your local community that would never give you the time of the day to talk upon religious matters. But, we've all got to eat. And a lot of people appreciate good food. So, again, we use the food to be able to bring about those conversations, bring about relationships that will help us to start to build up people. And again, we open up Advent Farms to conduct certain different workshops, and following the New Start program, we're able then to interact with some of the locals and again, have those kind of conversations. So that's some of the things that we do here at Advent Farms. So in a nutshell, what is Advent Farms? Advent Farms is an outpost centre, an outpost centre of influence, with its core mission being to facilitate, as I said, a holistic preparation of fellow Seventh-day Adventists, as well as an entering wedge to those in the highways and the byways. I should have been moving up with the slides. You have to forgive me here. So as you can see, we want to expose our neighbors to a plant-based diet, get them to see that, there's a relationship that exists between the mind and the body, explain to them these principles that, we've had in our bosom as Adventists for so long. Not all are adhering to it, but these are golden nuggets within our grasp that you'll be surprised to see how effective they are when employed in evangelistic efforts for the unchurched. So, as we say to them, it's not a diet, it's not a phase, it's a permanent lifestyle change. So, these are some of the ways we try to make an effort in witnessing to our local surroundings. Now, getting into the why we established Advent Farms. So we've obviously crossed over a little bit into the why, and when dealing with what is Advent Farms, that leads briefly on the point of preparation. I've mentioned preparation a couple of times, but I'm going to scale it back a little bit and talk about my earlier experience as a Seventh-day Adventist. As those earlier days played a fundamental role in the years to follow in our setting up Advent Farms. So just to go back a few years, I was baptized in January of 2006. So what's that going to be? About 18 years now, thereabouts. And came into the church, as did probably most of us coming into the church from the world, full of zeal, full of fire. And you want to get involved in the work of the Lord when you start to become acquainted with Adventism for the first time. And as I said, you're full of zeal, but as the Apostle Paul tells us, having zeal but not according to knowledge, right? So you're making zealous mistakes, but unbeknown to yourself at the point in time, you're really being trained in the school of not for future exploits. Now, the thing with Adventism, when you're coming fresh into the church, you learn things as a man that's coming from the world. You learn things that are really dynamic and seriously potent. That within a short space of time, through the power of the Holy Spirit convicting the conscience, you experience this paradigm shift in your whole outlook, in your perspective of life. And so, in fact, I'll put a little caveat in there because obviously, I appreciate that not everyone's transition is the same. For some, it might take a number of years to make that decision to give their lives to the Lord, as it were. And no doubt, the Lord during that time is patiently working with them, bringing them up step by step. And that's really, in fact, the way the Lord deals with each one of us. Even now, as we continue to journey on, he patiently waits with us, patiently, knocks on that door, patiently helps us to learn from our mistakes, and patiently continues to unfold to us more and more, But I describe my experience like this, and I'll leave certain things out because we could end up talking about my journey into Christianity for several hours, and we'd probably never get into the point of Advent Farms. But nonetheless, I describe my experience like this because there were a number of life-changing incidents that transpired in my life, which would, bring about this paradigm shift in such a short transition, and would result in me giving my life to the Lord. So as I said, I became baptized in the beginning of 2006, and the Lord had me, or the Lord gave me, I should say, a thirst for reading. And so, I got into consuming books on a regular basis, and I'd read, our health periodicals and the various different Adventist health books, the counsels on country living, and, especially got into the books on prophecy. And so these things had a bearing in terms of how, I would see my role in the Lord's vineyard. And then the company of guys that I was moving with, who were, quite instrumental in not only bringing me to the Lord, but really helping me to get a firm foundation in the things of God, and the pillars of our faith as Seventh-day Adventists. Now, they run a when I was just coming into Adventism, they was running a self-supporting ministry, and were really on fire at the time. Meetings were being held regularly, prophecy schools, etc. And within these meetings, the word of God would be broken down, unfolding the final events, this earth's history, along with our church's role in proclaiming the third angel's message to, a dying world, right? And so it was in these studies you learn about God's call for his church to set up outpost centers, by where we, are to work the cities and to set up sanitariums, for the restoration of health, but more importantly, as an entering wedge for the third angel's message. Now, along this journey, you'd come across, different ministries that were taking up this call, that were, embarking upon this challenge of going forward, by faith, to establish outpost centers where training would be offered to fellow Adventists. But here's the thing. One of the things I noticed, as a little observation back then, without exception, 100% without exception, they were always located in foreign fields. Typically America, the land of the free and brave. Not that I've got anything against America, but this reality, what does it mean for you and I, or even more so for the younger brother or sister that's just finishing their education, and is convicted as to the solemnity of the hour that we find ourselves living in, right? Wants to get involved in the Lord's work, follow his call, move out of the city and begin maybe some form of homestead ministry, but doesn't necessarily, have the skill set or experience to go forward in any meaningful way. And so what tends to happen, as they or as we look around to see, who's out there offering this support and service, 9 times out of 10, where are we directed to? And I'm referring more to 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. I know today's a little bit different. There's several ministries here in the UK that are doing a good work and are offering training now. You've got the Brethren up in Scotland, those up in, I think, just above Leeds, Manor House, and other ministries besides. But generally speaking, the advice would always come back. There's a place over there in Spain, or there's a place over there in Portugal, or have you checked out such and such in America? Or maybe, some brethren are doing something over there in the Caribbean. Yeah. A great work, and maybe we can get a link up with them. And this is all well and good. So I'm not saying you can't learn anything and gain valuable experiences from those ministries in other countries. 100%. You can obviously, learn much, right? But context is everything. So, I hope your audience don't get the wrong impression from what I'm saying. But when we think about this for a moment, the UK contrasting, with the Caribbean, for example, or Tennessee or Florida in America, or even closer to home in certain parts of Europe, even if we think about, the climate as just one variable, it can be vastly different. So in the case of setting up a homestead and learning, how to grow food, and I'm going to maybe focus a little bit on that, because we're dealing with why Advent Farms, why set up a ministry of this sort here in the UK. Now, so when you're considering about learning how to grow food, whilst there's principles that can definitely transcend geographical differences, 100%. However, there's going to be a host of challenges that you're not going to be prepared for if, you've not gained an experience in a region or thereabouts where you intend to become established. So, you've got the level of, if you think about humidity, yeah, the amount of rainfall, the UV exposure from the sun, in locations that are closer to the equator. All these are factors that have a bearing in the application of growing food. And even as another example, I've got a friend that he's from Jamaica, moved to the UK, I'd say probably about 25 years ago, definitely a couple decades ago. And I know when he was young, back in Jamaica, he used to do farming. And then when he moved here to the UK, he got employed at the NHS, but he had allotments. He had, several plots in an allotment. And so, he would continue doing his farming, but here in the UK, right? And he went back recently to live in Jamaica during the pandemic, so about 2 years ago. And when he went back, he went back to St. Elizabeth, Southside St. Elizabeth. Now, here's the thing. And that particular part of the country, it's very dry, extremely dry, right? And so he went there and he started, opened up ground. He managed to get himself some land, opened up the ground, planted a load of crop at a particular time of the year, employing the same methods that he employed here in the UK. And unfortunately, it was met with disappointing results. He lost a lot of crops, and he had to go through this whole process of re-education, to be able to understand the needs of the plants in that jurisdiction, So again, it's not that you can't benefit from going abroad to be trained for ministry. A number of times, we, and I don't mean me, just exclusively me personally, so to speak, but different ministries here in the UK, for example, would invite different brethren to come over here and run workshops, bring with them obviously their experience, by which we would then become more qualified in certain lines of work. But there are definitely factors that are more beneficial or make it more beneficial, in a certain context. Again, on this point, for instance, if we think about on the point of planning laws and certain restrictions, so we might be getting advice as to how to build a log cabin, or how to do certain building works, how to obtain planning permission, etc. But that's going to be vastly different in other lands than it would be in the UK. So, one of the things I noticed, and one of the things a lot of us will notice when it comes to these type of training institutions, they're very scarce when it comes to something that's on the soil of where we live, right? And again, if you consider the medicinal side of things, certain herbs that might be extremely potent and work wonders in particular applications might not necessarily be able to be grown here in the UK. And here's the thing about that. Obviously, right now we can go to our local health food store, get some herbs that's been imported, or we might be able to import them ourselves, right? That might not necessarily be able to grow over here. But here's the thing: what do we do? And this is where our mind needs to our mind needs to come into this kind of equation, right? We need to be thinking in regards to the future, because obviously we're going to come to a point when you can't buy or sell. You won't be able to order golden seal off the internet at that moment, right? Which obviously works wonders in certain applications in regards to health. So we really need to learn as much as possible how to navigate in the upcoming crisis with the resources that are locally available, because it's those local resources and geographical conditions that are going to be either friend or foe, during that time period. And how we approach this now will really determine, our relationship with these external variables. So again, yes, you can definitely, gain, a large amount of benefit from being trained in foreign fields, but hands down on a number of levels, it's going to be more advantageous, to learn these things in your environment of habitat, right? So now, I guess also to mention, if you think about financial aspect, whether you're, going on a short course of a week, fortnight, or month, whatever the case may be, it'd be far more practical and affordable, to attend somewhere in your own country, which ultimately means the process of becoming equipped with the necessary skill set to follow, the Lord's calling into country living and embark on a particular part of the Lord's work is going to be far more accessible, and ultimately, I guess that's why we've taken the step that we've taken in terms of setting up Advent Farms here in the UK, simply because there's a lack of ministries that might be doing certain things here, and we're having to if you think about a family of four that want to go away and experience some level of training, some meaningful level of training, that's some serious money they've got to find. But if there can be institutions here in the UK that will offer that type of service, right, that will teach you how to grow food, teach you how to become self-reliant, how to possibly do some building, how to navigate the planning minefield that we have here in the UK, how to become off-grid, etc. Yeah, the money you're going to be saving on having to spend air travel, accommodation, etc., that's going to be able to then be redirected into that personal project. So it's a win-win, right? So we took that step to begin Advent Farms, to be able to provide and create an environment and provide this level of service. And obviously, it's a work in progress, and in progress. Hence the title or the name, the Advent Farms Project, right? So another aspect to consider why we took the leap of faith, or rather than another aspect to consider, another reason behind why we took that step. As Christians, everything we do, especially concerning life's choices, we've been given much advice, much counsel, right, from the Word of God and the pen of inspiration, the writings of Ellen White. And so I'm just going to, in fact, you've got it on your screen here, that quotation I'll take from the book Education, page 125. I'll just read it out for you. She says, the central theme of the Bible, the theme about which every other in the whole book clusters, is the redemption plan, the restoration in the human soul of the image of God. And so every other theme in the Bible, I won't read the whole quote for sake of time, but every other theme in the Bible is hemmed upon this one glorious theme, right? The redemption plan, the restoration of the image of God in man, in the human soul. Now, when we go over to the Gospel of Mark, chapter 2, verse 9 and verse 10, it says, whether is it easier to say to the sick of the palsy, thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, arise and take up thy bed and walk, but that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins, he saith to the sick of the palsy. So what is being brought to view here, and why am I even bringing this out? Now, we just saw that the central theme of the Bible, around which every other theme clusters, is the restoration of the image of God in man, right? So in other words, when Christ healed, yes, he was interested in their physical needs, but his primary objective in the healing of disease was and is to heal the soul. I believe we'd all agree on this, right? To restore the image of God in man. So now, whilst I'm making a case for the need of an outpost to facilitate the work of instructing brethren in physical, tangible preparation, i.e. learning how to grow good, nutritious food, how to utilize that food for health restoration, the primary object in all these facets has to be a heart work, a work of restoration, not self-preservation, because, at the end of the day, you can become an expert marksman in, all various fields of preparation, right? But if they don't find their proper place in the central theme, which was just brought to view, then, as the Apostle Paul says, it would just be a sounding brass or tinkling cymbal. So when we look at the instruction that God has given you and I in regards to growing our own food, adopting a healthier and more primitive lifestyle as we get ready for the crisis up ahead, it's not simply for our temporal prosperity, but it's for more so our eternal welfare. Now, regarding this point, I'd like to share a couple more quotes from the inspired writings of Sister White. And we're told, this is taken from CH 344, paragraph 1. And we're told that the relation that exists between the mind and the body is very intimate. When one is affected, the other sympathizes. The condition of the mind affects the health to a far greater degree than many realize. Many of the diseases from which men suffer are the result of mental depression, grief, anxiety, discontent, remorse, guilt, distrust. All tend to break down the life force and to invite decay and death. And then we're told that the stomach has a controlling power upon the health of the entire body. The brain nerves are in strong sympathy with the stomach. So, she's getting a little bit more, or giving us a little bit more information, a little bit more detail in terms of this relation that exists between the mind and the body, right? And how one affects the other. Yeah. So now it's kind of like, getting into this relationship between the brain and between the stomach. She goes on to say, the brain is the capital of the body, the seat of all the nervous forces and of mental action. Yeah. Then down at the bottom says the senses are the avenues to the soul. And finally, we're told the brain nerves, which communicate with the entire system, are the only medium through which heaven can communicate with man and affect his inmost life. Whatever disturbs the circulation of the electric currents in the nervous system lessens the strength of the vital powers, and the result is a deadening of the sensibilities of the mind. So, the question's asked then, is there a connection between our brain nerves, our minds, and our stomach? Absolutely. We just pretty much read that, right? And so, is there an importance as to what we put into our bodies? 100%. Now, when you couple these thoughts along with the current situations that are challenging societies today, such as food shortages, the sharp increase in prices of food, along with emerging and current technologies that are developing ways of preserving food for far longer. So, your tomatoes or I don't know, bananas, oranges, whatever the case may be, instead of lasting a week or so, will be able to last for around a month, yeah, without the usual food preservation methods such as canning or freezing. As well as technologies called gene editing, which, by the way, the UK passed. I believe they passed that law into legislation sometime last year, which basically allows for scientists to edit the genes of vegetables and animals to have them become resistant to certain diseases and droughts. Yeah, because everything's being looked upon from the light or through the lens of climate change, right? So they're developing these different types of technologies to be able to get rid of the amount of food wastages, which it might seem like a good thing, because obviously if you can get rid of food wastages and food lasts a lot longer, the price might start to come down. But playing God with the genetics of the food, I dare say, will not end well for us consumers. Yeah. Now, there's a whole host of other factors that we could get into that would validate the need for you and I to take more accountability where possible in the way of practical preparation. But chiefly, as said, the main driver must be coming from the perspective of salvation. It must be coming from a heart that is willing to cooperate with God, in this restoration of his image in the mind of man. So, when we're thinking about, okay, we need to be learning how to grow our own food, we need to be learning how to live more primitively. All of these things have to be really centered in that main primary objective, the cooperation with God, that his work may be accomplished in us, as opposed to, I need to try and escape that crisis that's coming. I need to try and escape, the isms and the schisms that's prevailing in society. Yeah. Now, we're further told in first manuscript releases that God's purpose in giving the third angel's message to the world is to prepare a people to stand true to him during the investigative judgment. Yeah. So inspiration makes it very clear as to what the role of the third angel's message is. Yeah. In that statement, it says it is to prepare a people for the investigative judgment. Now, what does it say in the rest of that quote? This is the purpose for which we establish and maintain our publishing houses, our schools, our sanitariums, hygienic restaurants, treatment rooms, and food factories. This is our purpose in carrying forward every line of work in the cause. So, inspiration makes the point very clearly that all these other lines of ministerial work, are to be governed by this primary purpose, being brought to view here, right? And so whilst we're engaged in these various modes of operation, whether it's the medical missionary work, whether it's, what we're doing here with the farming work and the homestead preparation, we need to ever have these thoughts in the forefront of our minds. For as Paul said, just going back to the Apostle Paul, anything less than that is as sounding brass and tinkling cymbal. Another quote here, taken from 2 SAT 53, paragraph 2, says, the grand judgment is taking place and has been going on for some time, obviously referring to the investigative judgment that has begun with the dead, but is soon to transition to the living. She says, now the Lord says, measure the temple and the worshippers thereof. Remember, when you're walking the streets about your business, God is measuring you. When you're attending your household duties, when you engage in conversation, that God is measuring you. Remember that your words and actions are being daguerreotyped or photographed in the books of heaven as the face is reproduced by the artist on the polished plate. And, I'll add to that, if I may, that whilst we're learning how to grow food, God is measuring us. Whilst we're, learning medical missionary work, God is measuring us. Whilst we're building our country home, God is measuring us. Whilst we're looking for land which to start our homestead and come out of the city, God is measuring us. God is measuring our motives as to why it is that we're doing what we're doing. Am I doing this for, me, myself, and and my immediate family? Or place myself, or am I doing this to place myself in a situation that I may become, or I may be able to increase my ability of service, that I may be able to be of service to assist and help others also to be able to prepare themselves for what's coming up ahead. These are the various different things that sometimes get lost sight of in the rush to make that move. We went through a turbulent time over the past few years, right? During the pandemic, and we saw, a real arousal amongst God's people and even those in the world. And a lot of people was making good moves, but then there's some that just simply just moved out of fear and just, got fearful and thought, listen, I need to literally run for the hills and protect myself. The Lord doesn't want us moving like that. The Lord doesn't want us, to start ministry from those motivating factors. He wants us to be moved by the urgency of helping others. Yeah, that's a primary purpose. So these motivating principles are going to be the deciding factor, yeah, as to whether or not we make it through the upcoming crisis, as to whether or not our names are retained in the Lamb's Book of Life. Now, we're told that we must all be rich in good works in this life, if we would secure the future immortal life. When the judgment shall sit and the book shall be opened, every man will be rewarded according to his works. Many names are enrolled on the church books, on the church book, that have robbery recorded against them in the ledger of heaven. And unless these repent and work for the master with disinterested benevolence, they will certainly share in the doom of the unfaithful steward. Now, when we settle into this fact, that any of our ministry efforts, and specifically for us here, at Advent Farms, involved in outpost ministry, that our primary objective, whether through the branch of farming or cooking classes or teaching brethren skills in building a homestead, etc. Now, when we settle into this fact that our primary objective is to help people to prepare for the investigative judgment, this heavenly mandate then gives you, the impetus to keep on pushing forward, no matter what, the enemy throws at you, right? Because, sometimes the work can become frustrating, and when it becomes frustrating, it really becomes frustrating. But nevertheless, the motivating factor is the driving force that keeps you going. Yeah. And so, the measuring rod that you employ to evaluate its success, it can't be exclusively based upon the regular metrics that are used in, common lines of business. For instance, did we break even this season? Or have we made a profit on those new polytunnels that we invested, X amount of money in, etc. Now, obviously, these considerations have their place. Many of us, when we might move out of the city into the country, we need to find some form of occupation. We might be able to start some type of farmstead and be able to make a living from that. So they have their place, they have their considerations, but they're not to be the all-absorbing criteria, especially when considering the time in which we're living in, which is expressed in the following quote, that the work of the people of God is to prepare for the events of the future, which will soon come upon them with blinding force. So, even though we prepare for what's coming, it's going to be a very uncomfortable situation, and so that preparation should not be put off. But it's something that we need to be getting involved with, whilst it's still day, right? We're told that the voice of the true watchman needs now to be heard all along the line. The morning cometh and also the night. The trumpet must give a certain sound, for we are in the great day of the Lord's preparation. So, you see it through the pen of inspiration here, We're in a special time of this Earth's history, when great changes are taking place, changes of which we have been warned will be rapid ones. Now, one of the things we try and emphasize and get across here at Advent Farms is the need to be investing in the other forms of capital. Yeah. Now, what do I mean? Usually, when we hear the word capital in this context, the first thing or first thought that comes to our mind, for most of us at least, is probably financial, whether it be in the form of assets, i.e. home ownership, or in liquidity, cash or savings in the bank, etc. And so most of us haven't trained our minds to put some of our energy into accumulating some of the other forms of capital. And again, all the various forms of capital should be governed by, how we respond to the gospel, right? And so other forms of capital are things such as energy, and by that I mean electric, yeah? So whether through biodiesel, solar or wind, or a combination of the various different ways that you can generate electricity. That's one form of capital, yeah? Or another form of capital, I should say. You've got financial, you've got energy. Another form of capital is going to be a food supply, a food source, we all saw how obviously vulnerable the system's food supply chain was during the time of the pandemic, not to mention the alarming rise in the use of chemicals being employed in the quest for food preservation, which we just spoke about a moment ago. And as Adventists, we know that there's coming a time when buying or selling is going to be an option that's no longer available, right? At least to the faithful Christian. So developing a form of capital in regards to food, a food source, is highly important. And if we wait until the storm arrives, we're going to find ourselves in a really hard place. Now, the Lord has given us ample warning to get our house in order. And so, as a result of this counsel and of the signs of the times, Advent Farms came into being. We, again, made that step to facilitate this work of preparation, both for the household of faith and those, in the highways and the byways. Now, how do we maintain and build Advent Farms? How do we maintain it and how do we build it? Now, so as I said, Advent Farms began back in 2014. So 10 years ago. So, time does fly. Advent Farms began back in 2014. It was located on the edge of a little village called Whitfield, just outside of a market town called Brackley, over in Northamptonshire, in the county of Northamptonshire. And it was about 2013 that I first saw a property come up for rent, which was located about 3 miles from the famous Silverstone racetrack, where they hold a Grand Prix once a year, again just outside of Brackley. Now, this property was a 3.5 acre small holding, really nicely landscaped and well positioned, tucked away at the end of the village, so you could do certain things without your neighbours peering over your garden wall, right? So after a bit of going back and forward with the agents, with the letting agents that were managing the property, I finally got through in the summer of 2018 to be able to lease this property. And it was a real eye-opener in that, before, you might have had to manage a medium-sized garden, which would require you to periodically, get a lawnmower and cut a bit of grass, right? Plug the hedge trimmer in and trim the hedges, and basically you're pretty much done. But here now, you're not really talking about a garden that's 30 foot by, say, 20 foot. You're now facing what at the time was like a mammoth 3.5 acres of grass, a dozen or so fruit trees, shrubs, and with all sorts of ground care, right? So it was a little bit overwhelming to begin with, if I'm honest. It wasn't like you could just go out there with a lawnmower and do a little bit at a time, because by the time you've cut there, and then you cut there, and then you got over there. The first part has already grown back, so you couldn't approach it like that. I did, but obviously the approach just wasn't practical. So then you get about making acquaintances within the village. You ask, who's who does what, etc. And I got introduced to a guy at the end of the lane. So I got introduced to this guy at the end of the lane. That would basically, he was like a kind of handyman in the local village. And he'd cut people's grasses, the local guys that had a little bit of a paddock to put their horses on, etc. And so after talking with him, it was agreed for him to come and cut, our field, right? And deal with the gardens around the house. And he'd come and done the field, which was, it was okay, a bit pricey. And I thought, well, okay, but, what can I say? He got the job done. And then he came, and as I said, he'd done the grounds around the house, and it was a complete and utter mess, right? When he finished, and I spoke to him, and he just basically said, "Well, look, this is pretty much the nature of the beast. You got to cut it, and to begin with, it would be a mess, and the more times I come back and cut it, the better it will look." And the way he explained it, it made sense to a degree. It made sense to a degree. So, what do I know? I'm just a guy that was born and raised in the city, right? Never was a keen gardener, had no experience with ground care machinery. So I had nothing really to gauge what he was saying to me. No way to really measure, his testimony. So I was in a little bit of a vulnerable position. And of course, as we know, at certain times of the year, grass continues to grow and grow quite quickly, which meant for me that I had to get him back to deal with the groundwork, right, and take care of business. Now, a couple more times he came back, each time his price would increase, just a little bit, but it would increase, and the work, it never really got any more tidier. And I'd be thinking to myself, what's happening here? But at the time, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, simply because of your lack of experience in this context, to be able to navigate you through these challenges, right? Now, to the guy's credit, the one thing he did do was that was good, was to eventually advise me as to some equipment that would help me to become more independent in as far as it goes with managing the grounds. And so, following his advice, I went and purchased a used compact tractor. Never heard of what a compact tractor was before. I knew what a tractor was, obviously, but never knew of these compact tractors. So they're just small little things, probably at the height of maybe, I don't know, just above waist height. And so I purchased this. I found one on eBay over in Peterborough. Arranged to get it picked up. I got it with several type of implements, which were like attachments that would go on the back of it. There was a rotavator, a grass topper, which basically is like a lawnmower, but is propelled by the motor of the tractor. And there's a few other different implements that I can't quite remember right now. And that was probably the best thing that I'd done since taking on that place. And from there on, things began to get a little bit more organized and a little bit more efficient, a little bit more manageable, which resulted in us, starting to see some steady progress. Now, I'm bringing these details to view because it's important that your audience knows that there's certain things you might get involved in where shortcuts just simply don't work, and they definitely cost you more money in the long run. Now, obviously, again, context is going to be everything. I'm not suggesting never to make a move until you've got all the type of machinery that you might need for a particular task, but just to know off the bat that you have to factor these things in. You definitely need the right tools, the right equipment in order to expedite your mission. So excuse me, again, just being open and frank, we've had to learn this the hard way, really. And we're going to get into the list of things that you need to start a farm or a market garden in a moment. And so even though there are, things that 100% I would do differently if I were to start again, there's a wonderful and encouraging quote from Ellen White, which is taken from Prophets and Kings, that really, helps me to know that it wasn't wasted time. And she tells us, I just realized I forgot to show you guys some of the slides, and I'll just quickly go back. In actual fact, I'll get into those ones in a minute. In actual fact, I just realized that they're actually for. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We haven't got this. I haven't got this quote on the slide. Yes, I have. Yes, I have. It's right here. Okay, so this is taken from Prophets and Kings, page 595, paragraph 1. So it says, the way of the world is to begin with pomp and boasting. God's way is to make the day of small things the beginning of the glorious triumph of truth and righteousness. Yeah. So even though, we started off a certain way, the Lord would have it a certain way that, listen, we become, the triumph is all the more glorious, basically, right? She says, sometimes he trains his workers by bringing to them disappointment and apparent failure. It is his purpose that they shall learn to master difficulties. Okay, so again, so even though I said, if I were to start an outpost again, my approach would be different. Now, however, I don't regret our past mistakes, because within those experiences, the lessons learned, are really invaluable. And I believe will also be a blessing to others, because the amount of mistakes that we've made in this journey, and so the things that we've learned, and obviously, we don't know everything, and there's still much more to learn, and there's still mistakes that we make. But however, nonetheless, the mistakes that we have made and the lessons we've learned from them, I believe will really has really placed us in a good position to now be able to share our experience with many other brethren, that they may be able to, avoid some of those pitfalls, and to be able to, expedite their journey moving forward. So now, whilst they're at the first farm, whilst we were there at the first farm, we weren't exactly sure as to the direction that the Lord wanted us to go in with Advent Farms, but we knew whatever the direction was, we wanted to own our own place, because obviously you can only do so much when you're renting, right? We wanted to put down certain foundations that would, help us more to create an environment, that would facilitate an experience and a preparation for the Christ up ahead and for the Lord's second coming. So in 2014, whilst we were still up for that farm, we was considering, where we would go. In 2014, whilst we were still at the other place, we managed to put on our first school, which was entitled, I believe it was entitled Redemption Plan. Oh, sorry, Redemption in the Garden. Yeah, Redemption in the Garden. And it was a wonderful experience. It ran for 7 days, and individuals would come and camp out on the grounds. And this was put on in the summer, so obviously it was, a really nice atmosphere. And then the following year, in 2015, we put on another school, which I believe was called God's Pharmacy, which was a little bit of a play on words. And it was off the back of these two schools that we became convicted that the Lord wanted us to get into, farming of food, to be an essential part of the ministry. Not that food is the main focus of God's work in any way, but as previously said in the outset, that the food could be a wonderful tool by which we could have many doors opened to people's hearts, right? That way we can be able to start to have those conversations and build up those meaningful relationships, which otherwise might be closed to us. Now, fast forward in a couple of years, as I said, this farm was obtained, through a yearly lease that was renewed each year. And my wife and I talked and realized, as I mentioned a moment ago, that staying there would, not allow us to really establish Advent Farms in the way we believe the Lord was directing us, because again, you can only do so much with rented property. And we wanted to take it to the next level, but nonetheless, just on that point there, at the same time, certain times renting is your only option. And for us, or for myself at that point in time, because when I first moved there, I didn't get married until the following year. I moved there in 2013, got married in 2014. So at the time, renting was the only option at that point in time. And that might be the case for many of us, or many of you, who wants to make certain moves. Now, renting can also be a good thing as well, because it allows you to really test the waters. It allows you to make certain mistakes. It allows you to experiment with the land, and figure out, which way is the best way to go. So, renting has its advantages, basically, rather than you just making a big jump and purchasing right from the outset. So you can plow up. I mean, obviously, with the agreement of the landlord, you can plow up a part of the pasture. If you've rented a small holding, you can grow certain food. You're going to learn how to deal with weeds. You might make certain mistakes that exasperate the weed problem. But again, at least you're learning in a rented property, and it's not going to cause any major problems or long-term implications for the landlord, because all the landlord is going to do once you've moved out is just replow that land, harrow it, sow it with grass seed, and just put it back to pasture. So it's not leaving some big major problem for anyone, but it's allowed you to understand, the land, to become acquainted, with invasive weeds and, the best way to deal with them, etc. So renting can definitely be a viable option to begin with. But for a long term, we just knew that we needed to purchase somewhere. So now, getting back to our move, we then purchased just shy of 9 acres. And let's see now. So this should be on the screen now. So we then purchased just shy of 9 acres, which basically, if you can see on the screen, it runs from, it's from over in the far corner, we can see the polytunnel. If you follow the tree line going all the way down to the right and then back down, it's basically those two fields there. Yeah. Now, when we purchased this, this was back in 2018, still in the county of Northamptonshire, a little bit further north, but where is it now? It's probably about 45 minutes drive from where we was. Now, the land itself now is situated in a kind of a basin, so it has hills surrounding it in 3 directions. And unbeknown to us at the time, what this meant was, during times of rain, we'd get loads of runoff water that would cause our field to become a bit waterlogged. And not only that, but again, unbeknown to us, there were several channels of old clay field drainage pipes. Now, some of you might have discovered them in your gardens, possibly. And what they are, they're old clay pipes that are probably about the length, generally speaking, of your elbow to your wrist, right, or to your hand, so about a foot long, and about probably maybe 3 inches in diameter. Now, the thing is, what these pipes are not like the pipes you'd have today, in plumbing. They wouldn't be connected by what is called a coupling, which would basically tie the 2 pipes together, ensuring that there would be no leakage, or no leakage would occur. Instead, those old clay pipes back in like Victorian days, what they would do to have like good field drainage, they would dig out channels within their fields and lay these clay pipes down in them, and then they would just butt them up next to each other. Okay, so obviously water it follows the least path of resistance, right? So even though they weren't really connected with a coupling, the water would just pass through them. But obviously over the years, 50, 60, 70, 80 years, you've had ground movement, you had clay starting to bung up, or soil starting to bung up the pipes. And so what you'd have is a misalignment of those pipes now, and that water that might be running through the little nooks and cracks of, what's accessible within those pipes, they would start to seep out and just settle in certain parts of the field. So, this would be big problems for us, because during the wetter months of the year, we'd find certain parts of the field, predominantly the area that we cultivated for the growing of crops. Certain parts would just constantly be waterlogged. So what we'd have to eventually do is get like an excavator. So we'd have to hire an excavator, and we dug out. If you can see on your screen, you've got some parts of this first field where you've got the bare soil, and then just above that you've got what looks like a kind of, I guess, straw color, yeah. So, and then at the top of that, so you've got a little bit more bare soil. So that's the area that we've cultivated as the farm now. And that's about 300 foot by 300 foot, thereabouts. And so what we ended up doing was just using a mini excavator and digging out a ditch all the way around, essentially creating some kind of moat, yeah. And then that ditch now would tap in, that water would tap into a culvert that runs under the land into the neighbour's field, yeah, into his ditch. So we'll just make a channel and open it up to make it accessible into that culvert. And so, that's one of the things that we had to do. And once we'd done that, and it took us a couple of years to really figure this out, because again, even though we'd had some experience from the previous place, there were still challenges that we were unexposed to, right? So, it took us a couple of years to really figure out what the best way, because we'd hired an excavator on several occasions, digging out different parts, and we just basically not come up trumps. So eventually that's the route we took, and it's proved quite successful. We still obviously get a level of water standing in the winter months, simply or largely because Northampton's water table is quite high. Now, one of the next things that we had to, sort about doing was to put a farm track in, because it was just basically an empty field, just a blank canvas. So, between Jackie and myself, we again got the excavator out, hired an excavator, as you can see there on your screen, and we went about digging out a track. So, which is about probably maybe 800 foot long, on a kind of zigzag type of profile, going from one point right to the far end, where you might have seen that little polytunnel there. Again, we're not civil engineers, but we're just doing what we can. So we dug out this track. We've got loads of loads of crushed hardcore and what you call road planings, and just packed that up into the road area that we carved out, which was I'd say about 10 foot wide. So just wide enough for a car to pass through, and a little bit more, from one side of the farm to the next. And that basically allowed us access right through the year, because what you'd find is that you're able to work for 6-7 months of the year, be able to drive your van or whatever vehicle you've got onto the grass, bring materials of all sorts onto the farm, and put in whatever necessary things you needed to put in place. But once you got into the wetter months, you'd then be left stranded to have to walk from the gate, in some instances, 600 feet over to the other side. And if obviously you've got heavy material to take with you, it becomes a really, really painstaking task. So these are some of the things that you're going to have to get sorted out when you get land. You're going to have to work out the drainage. You're going to have to work out access in putting a field track in the land. Yeah. Then some of the other things you can see there, just leveling out some of the road there in the picture on the left hand side. In terms of putting some of the infrastructure there. So some of the other stuff we had to set about doing now was creating a wash station. So the wash station now is a little barn that we put up, was about 35 foot by 15 foot, because you're going to need somewhere to process all the vegetation that you're growing. Yeah. In the early days, for the first few years, we'd literally just make a makeshift one out of a marquee. And, it'd be little bit challenging on windy days and when the rain would come down. But eventually, we've got to build a small barn and converted that into a wash station, where we're able to have a commercial sink and plumbing, etc., and packing tables for us to be able to then bring in the produce that we harvest from the field straight to there. Yeah. So you need to get the infrastructure right. You need to have a cool area to keep your vegetation, because once you've harvested it, you need to get the temperature that's on those produces, or that's on the produce in the field, so what's commonly called the field temperature, away from those crops as soon as possible in order for preservation. So here you see is the wash station in production or in building. And again, putting up polytunnels as well. The Lord is really good. On our journey, we've always managed to come across different individuals that are even literally giving away such things, or selling at a really cheap price. Maybe these particular polytunnels we obtained from a market garden down in Devon some years ago, and again we got them for a really cheap price. And so here we was putting them up. So we've now got more polytunnels put up. We've got several more as well that we're still going to put up. One of the things that we've realised over the past few years, we've noticed that, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have noticed as well, that it's raining a lot more. We're experiencing a lot more wetter weather. This year has been phenomenal. It's probably been the worst year for growing in our whole several years of growing food. And so it's just reinforced the decision to put up more polytunnels, because then at least you've got some level of control in as far as it goes with the environment, right? You can basically make sure that the crops are not getting over wet. The land is not getting over drenched and becoming boggy, which would obviously kill any crops that's in the ground. So yeah, we put up the polytunnels, and then we started to create our bed structure. Yeah. Now, what we did here at Advent Farms, in creating our beds, we designed, again, on that part that I showed you earlier, which was 300 foot by 300 foot, we basically split up that field block into 24 manageable growing blocks. Yes, so each one of those blocks have got 9 beds in those blocks. So the blocks are about 34 foot by 30 foot. Each bed is 30 foot long by 9 inches. So 30 foot long by 30 inches wide. Now, there's a reason why we went for 30 inches wide. You'll find this out if you get into growing food on that kind of scale. Most tools are designed um, to accommodate for 30-inch beds. That's the standard in the market garden industry. So, to try and do something different would really just make your life a little bit harder. Yeah. And one of the things that you're going to want to really get involved in and make sure you do or work toward is to have your farm become less burdensome, that it become more enjoyable. Because if it's more enjoyable and less burdensome, it's going to be more endurable. Yeah, because sometimes some of us can start something and the work's so taxing that, listen, we just end up giving up because it's just too hard. So we want to set about creating an environment that you're never going to get away from hard work, but you can make work a little bit more lighter, as they say, to work smart, right? So we've got our beds at 30 inches wide. You're able to straddle the beds from both sides. You can just like put one foot on one side, one foot on the other. We've got 18-inch pathways, and you can work those beds from either side. So it makes it really easy to transplant your vegetation, etc. Yeah. So again, we've got 9 beds in each block, and there wasn't any major reason for having 9 beds to each block other than trying to fit in. We wanted to go for 24 blocks, and we wanted to fit them in and have our pathways between each block. If you look at the picture on the bottom right corner there, you'll see the green grass in between each block. And so we wanted to have a wide enough pathway in between each block. So we've got like about 7 foot in between, because we knew that we wanted to start holding workshops. And so obviously we're looking to accommodate individuals being on the ground maybe 15, 20, 30 at a time, and we're not walking over each other. Yeah. So we've got 7 foot rather pathways in between each block. So in total, we've got about 224 beds in that part of the farm. And then the polytunnels are on the other side of the farm. So we've got 3 commercial polytunnels put up at this moment. 2 are 60 foot by 20 foot, 9 foot high, and the other one is 75 foot by 25 foot wide and about 9 foot high. So a good amount of area that you can grow food in, and obviously that allows you to then extend your season. Yeah. Now, in terms of bed preparation, what we do in regards to bed preparation, so before we're going to plant out, and we use probably about 90% of the things we grow are transplants. Yeah. And so we employ a particular method into preparing our beds to eliminate some of that laborious work that you might have to do all through the season. You can't completely eliminate it, but you can minimize it to make it more manageable. So we start off by using a broad fork, because what you're going to need to do is to break up any soil compaction and aerate that soil. Yeah. So here's a picture of a broad fork. It's a little bit like a garden fork, but it's just a lot wider. It's probably about just under 30 inches wide. And the tines, the spikes on them, they're probably about 14 inches long. So they go a little bit deeper in the ground, and you only have to make one pass through that bed. So instead of using a garden fork where you'd have to make 2 passes, go down one side and then up the other side, it cuts your time in half, cuts your effort in half, and you can just go through with the broad fork, breaking up any compaction. So that's the first thing we do. We use the broad fork, break up any compaction, and now the soil to be aerated, because just like you and I, that needs fresh air, so does the soil with the microbial activity. It needs fresh air as well. Then the next thing that we do, if I can just get back to there, the next thing we do after that, we add our amendments. So we might use alfalfa meal, alfalfa pellets, like dried alfalfa, organic, or we might use organic chicken pellets. Yeah, so dried out chicken manure in essence. Okay, and we're spread that those amendments on the bed. We use about let's get from mine in terms of measurements now. Probably about half a regular bucket size, about half a bucket size to one bed, basically. Yeah, so we're put our amendments down after we've broad forked, and then after we've put our amendments down, we then basically take a rotavator. We don't do hard tilling. Yeah, some people do completely no tilling. Some people, will really get into tilling, and there's different points of views on that. And again, context is everything, because you might approach this work and think, look, I'm going to do absolutely no tilling, but you might end up getting some ground that's excessively clayey, and you're going to have to break up that compaction to begin with, and you might have to till it for the first couple of seasons. So again, context is everything. Now we would use a little bit of tilling to begin with. We don't use that much now. We till probably the first top 2 inches. So you're not really disturbing that integral soil structure. Yeah. So after we've broad forked, and then we've put down our amendments, then we get about to run over the beds with a tiller and just lightly till the first top 2 inches, just to get a nice even bed. Following that, we then water the beds. Now, the reason why we water the beds, because no doubt you're going to have a level of weed seeds there. Now, again, we predominantly use transplants. We sow our seeds in the nursery, and then once they've reached a certain stage, we then bring them out into the field and we transplant them. So they've already got a chance in that they've grown a certain height and they're able to get ahead of maybe the weed seeds. But we really want to achieve a sterile bed as best as possible. So what we then do, we water the beds, and we get it really soaked up, really wet. And after we've done that, we then take these black plastics, which we call tarps, and we cover our bed area. Yeah, and we're covered that bed area. And again, depending upon the time of the year, if it's really hot, we'll only need to have those black plastics on the beds for about a week at most, sometimes just a few days, depending on the heat. And what you'll find, because we've watered those beds really well, what you'll find is that the heat will start to create this humidity, this moisture. Yes. And what happens there, it's like it's sending a signal to those weed seeds to start to germinate. Now, as they start to germinate, what happens next is obviously they're gonna reach for the sun, isn't it? But when they start to grow now and start to sprout out, there's no sunlight, and because there's no sunlight, they die off. So when you pull that back, you're now left with all the weed seeds, at least the vast majority of weed seeds that are able to germinate, that's living in, that's present in the top 2 inches of the beds. They've now germinated and now died. So now when you either direct sow, as in the case of maybe carrots, for instance, that you're going to direct sow into the beds, or if you're going to transplant your crops into those beds, you're transplanting into a pretty much sterile bed, and you're not going to have to, compete as they're not going to have to compete as ferociously. You're not going to have to work as hard to maintain a clean bed now. Yeah, so it's better to do a lot of the work on the beginning part of it than on the back end of it. Yeah, so that's how we really manage our beds to be as productive as possible. Now, as I said, when we sow our seeds, we do that in the nursery, and we're talking about things from, like in the picture on the left-hand side, from pumpkin seeds to kale seeds to the callaloo seeds. All various different things we sow in the nursery. Some might need a little bit extra care than others. Things like celery would take an awful long time to germinate. So, you're gonna get your celery seeds germinated a lot, or sown rather, a lot earlier than, say, your rainbow chard or your kale. Generally speaking, we tend to start sowing seeds from round about early March. Things like onions, spring onions, we can actually start to sow them much earlier, like end of January, etc. Yeah, pumpkin seeds, we start to sow them around about April, along with our courgettes, etc. Yeah, so different seeds will require to be sown in different times of the year. And then we use, a good seeding compost, and we use something called vermiculite. Now, if you go into your gardening centres to purchase, a 1 litre box of vermiculite, it will probably cost you around about £10. However, if you go to one of your hardware stores, like say Travis Perkins, not plugging Travis Perkins, but any hardware store like that, for instance, you can find vermiculite being sold in a 100-litre bag, and it's being sold for a different application. In the building industry, they will use vermiculite, and vermiculite is basically like a natural mineral. It absorbs moisture, absorbs and retains water, yes, and then it will release that gradually over time. And it's used in the building industry in some applications of insulation, and you can find those now in the building stores, 100-litre bags for about £25. So obviously, you do the maths. If you used to go in the garden centre and get the equivalent, you'll be paying over £100, because it can range between £10 and £13 just for 10 litres. So we'd take the vermiculite and we'd mix that into the soil to allow for good moisture retention. Yes, to germinate those seeds. Then, just prior to us transplanting those seeds, as you can see, Jackie here, my wife, she will spray the crops with a pesticide, a natural pesticide that might contain things like neem oil, things like peppermint, essential oil, water as obviously a base, etc. In order just to kind of give them that little bit of a head start as well, that they don't get bombarded by certain pests. Another thing that we do as well, we take the tray, because of those trays have got little holes at the bottom of them for the water to drain through. We dip those trays into another tray that has no holes, and we'd fill those other trays with a compost tea to basically inoculate them, yeah, and to boost up their immunity, as it were, that when they get into the soil, they're fighting fit. So we want to, really give our plants a good head start when we're growing our food for the season. So these are some of the practical measures that we use in Advent Farms. I know time is really upon us. I've probably been going on for a good hour and 20 minutes now. One of the other things that I'll mention as well, I've not got a picture for it, you'll probably be able to Google it, is the use of a machine called a paper pot transplanter, paper pot being one word. And what this will allow for is, instead of if you take, for instance, now, one of those trays on the screen there has got about 100 cells in it. So you've got 100 plants in effect, yeah? That you've got to go and transplant out, okay? Or if you thought about, possibly spring onions or beetroot that requires a lot less distance in spacing, it would take a long time to transplant. So to transplant out one of our beds that again are 30-foot long by 30 inches wide, to fill that bed up with, say, spring onions. Now we'd use about 5 rows in one of those beds, and we'd space them probably every 4 inches or every 6 inches. You're talking, a good few hundred plants in there. And so it'd take an individual probably the best part of 45 minutes to plant out a bed. Now, if you're going to imagine several beds of that, it's mounting up to hours. Now, this machine or this tool will allow you to basically transplant that bed within about 5 minutes. It's a shame I haven't got a picture of it here, but in essence, it's like a trolley jack. So you would take one of those trays, and those trays, the plants would be put into like a paper chain that would fill one of those trays. And so you just place that tray on the machine that looks like a trolley jack, the tool that looks like a trolley jack, and you'd take the paper chain, put it in a certain part, and as you pull it now, it actually creates a furrow and plants those paper chains and covers that furrow as it's going along, allowing you to be able to plant out one bed in a space of just a mere few minutes. Now, when you've got those type of tools now, in your setup, what might have taken, a team of maybe 3 or 4, you can now start to do that, hand solo. So again, it's making certain things far more accessible, And again, we've got to be thinking like that. How are we able to, manage our farm? How are we able to manage our homestead? Because again, the transition for many is going to be a painful one. Sometimes we romanticize the country living, and we have this notion of being able to really kind of transport our city lifestyle into a country lifestyle, and it doesn't work like that, But so that's pretty much how we manage advent farms. We are always looking for ways by which we can, minimize the work effort rather, and to be able to, become as efficient as possible. So I hope that what we've shared has been of some help. I hope the point has come across in relation to the driving factor, the motivating factor that should be driving each one of us to want to make these moves. And for those that might be interested in visiting Advent Farms, we do plan on hosting a number of workshops for free throughout 2025, God Sparing Life. So if you're interested in learning and getting some hands-on practical experience, because it's not just the farming that we deal with. Obviously, time doesn't permit for us to really go into everything, but it's the other areas as well in regards to setting up a homestead and those practical areas of preparation. From building a septic tank system on your farm, from getting off grid in as far as it goes with a water supply, harvesting water, etc. Using that for irrigation. We didn't manage to talk about irrigation here, but all of these various different areas are the things that we will be sharing and giving people an opportunity to get a hands-on experience when you come down and come and visit us at Advent Farms. So hand it back over to you at this point, Brother Trevor. And again, I hope it's been of some help.
that's been a blessing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Um, I don't know if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask. So there's the contact details on the screen for those of you that wish to get in contact with Earl. So info@adventfarms.org, www.adventfarms.org, and the phone number there on the screen, so that if you've got questions, you can follow up with Earl, and also interest in the upcoming how did courses, the upcoming courses for 2025 on aspects of setting up your homestead in the UK, in England particularly.
Mhm.
So this will be very, very beneficial. So again, if there's any questions, then feel free to put them in the comments and we'll address those. We know we're pushing the time, but we'll give a few moments for some Q&A.
Oh, of course. Yeah. All right.
So how did you come across these machineries? Was it by like you said earlier, mistake, or by the time you got to that level, you'd already like, all right, I need to get one of these things, and I need to get this, and or was it just the mistake and thinking, you know what, there's
Um,
got to be a better way?
well, part of it, you think there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way that is a little bit more efficient. But there's many people out there, on YouTube that are running market gardens for a living, and obviously, for the man in the world that's really about business, he's looking to be as efficient as possible. And so, funny enough, it's actually an Adventist. I never knew they were for many years. It's actually an Adventist um, um, Aventis owned store, Aventis owned business. I think they're called. Gosh, the name slips me now. Not Johnny's Seeds. Um, Farmer's Friend. Farmer's Friend. They've got they. I think it's actually one of the guys from Farmer's Friend, and they're based in America, I believe. That actually developed some of these tools. So, for instance, you've got something called a salad greens harvester, and it allows you to basically harvest and collect. So it's basically, in essence, a bag with a drill attached to it. And when you just a regular power drill, cordless power drill, and it's attached to a line that's attached to this bag and a reciprocating saw. So when push the trigger of the power drill, in effect, it basically it moves the reciprocal saw, and as you go over let's say, for instance, something like a salad mix, as you go over those crops, the reciprocating saw just cuts them rapidly, and it's got tassels on it, and it just pushes it into the bag. So again, what might take you, you know, half an hour to harvest, you're now able to do it in 2 minutes. So it was a case of really, just looking out there, coming across some of these guys on YouTube and seeing some of the tools that they use, and then
Right.
figuring out and finding out where you're able to get them. A lot of them are still out in America, but there are some stores. There's some in Europe. There's one now over here. I think they're called Reag Tools, and they're based in the UK. I think they're a distributor for one of the farms called Neversink Farm. So for those that might be interested, yeah, it's a matter of researching and find out, but they're out there.
And how much? So I was going to ask about the mineral that you were using, the one that I can't remember,
The vermiculite.
vermiculite.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not that much. I mean, what we tend to do, we've got like a big box, and like those storage boxes you can buy from B&Q with like a yellow lid, and black boxes. So we'll have those. We'll fill it up with our compost mix, and we'll use probably about to one of those full up. We'd probably use I would say a shovel load, a regular shovel load of the vermiculite in one of those mixes. And then you might sprinkle a little bit on the top of the tray once you filled up.
So
But one
the
of those,
Vegemite is used for seeding,
yeah. So
germinating.
we use those when we're germinating our seeds. So that vermiculite, basically, in essence, what it's doing, because compost, it doesn't hold moisture very well. It will
Right.
become exceedingly dry very quickly. So the vermiculite, that will hold on to that water, and it will just release it kind of slowly, allowing that compost mix to just, kind of retain a level of moisture.
See, yeah, I see.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, just checking if there's any other questions. So I've got a question here, about land. What is the criteria to live on a plot of land?
So here in the UK, obviously there's a number of different avenues that one can explore, but generally speaking, purchasing land without planning permission is always going to be a challenge. Now there are certain criteria that that if you meet, you can obtain those necessary planning consents. And so I'm just generalizing here because, again, there are different methods, yeah. But one of the methods are, if you're going to set up a certain enterprise, let's say you're going to be dealing with some form of livestock that might have the ability of breeding all year round, and it might, of necessity, cause for you to have to be on site, or at least be there, in a moment's notice. So in effect, cause you to have to live on site. That might be one of the criteria. So in effect, you've got three main things. You've got to demonstrate that there's an enterprise that's in need for that local area. Yeah. Then that local area doesn't necessarily mean, within a mile radius, but certainly within that county. Yeah. And then you'll have to demonstrate that the enterprise can generate enough finances to support, if you're a family of five, you're going to have to make sure that that enterprise can bring in a substantial revenue, because you'll need to demonstrate it can support a family of five. If you're a family of one, or if you're just on your own, rather, or a family of two, etc. And then again, you've got to demonstrate that enterprise can support a family of two. And then the third criteria is that you're not able to, or there's no other options available for you, i.e., let's say, for instance, now there might be some houses for rent 2 minutes away from where that land is. Or have you, are you able to go and rent one of those properties? So as long as you can demonstrate all three of those criteria, then you're able then to start getting to the realm of where you'll be getting temporary permission to live on site for a number of years, typically speaking 3 years, and at the end of which, and you've managed to prove those things, you'll then be in the realm of getting the necessary planning consents to actually build a traditional house. And obviously, even that then is has its own area as well, because the traditional house would have to be in line with certain regulations, maintaining that countryside approach. So there's a few different things there. Obviously, there's more. I mean, that's just a kind of like brief answer. There's more involved than that, but they're the general guidelines that you want to be considering if you're looking at land that doesn't come already with the necessary planning consents.
So follow on from that is, but those three criteria to a house or, but those three criteria to a house, or does it apply as well to a tiny house or a caravan? So something that's not
Right.
permanent.
Yes. Okay. Again, there's kind of crossovers here. Yeah. So now, again, there's different rules of engagement, and there's a really good book. I'll have to get it over to Trevor, and you might be able to, advertise it through
Hmm.
your network. Um, so there's different rules here. So depending on what you're doing, generally speaking, if you've got land and let's say you're growing food, there are laws already in place that stipulate you are allowed to live on your land for the length of your growing season. Yeah. So, if your growing season is for 6 months, generally speaking, you'll be able to live on that site to run your enterprise for the 6 months. If you are not doing anything, you just simply acquired some land. Maybe it's half an acre or whatever the case may be, you want to build a little tiny home on that land, then you will probably run into a little bit of bother. Obviously, if it's unnoticed and you're there for a number of years, then you might fall into the space of where you can then get a certificate of lawful development. But generally speaking, in order to be able to live on the land for any period of time, other than the rule that exists at the moment that you're allowed to live on your land without planning consents, without having any form of enterprise for up to 28 days of any 1 year. But beyond that, you would then have to start looking at fulfilling any one of those other criteria.
I see. So a different question on a different line is, what is the pesticide that you used?
Okay, so there's a few different pesticides we use, but one of them that Jackie would use before I go and transplant out will be something that will contain neem oil. Yeah. So let's work from a base of 1 liter then. Yeah. So you'd use like a teaspoon of neem oil. All right. You'd use a teaspoon of Ecova washing up liquid. Yeah. So obviously a plant-based washing up liquid. It doesn't have to be Ecova, but a natural, plant-based washing up liquid. And then you'd also put in that 2 drops of peppermint oil, and you can also put in there 2 drops of cayenne pepper as well. Yeah. So typically speaking, and then you fill the bottle up with your water. So the neem oil, what the neem oil does on certain pests, it will cause some of the insects to not be able to eat and not be able to function. Yeah. And so they would start to die off. The scent of the cayenne pepper will act as a deterrent as well. The Ecova, that will allow it to stay onto those leaves. So even obviously if you get a heavy rain, it's still gonna stay onto those leaves. But typically speaking, that's the kind of pesticide that we would use.
I see. And is that pesticide something that you applied just at that in that seedling stage, or throughout the whole
No,
growing cycle?
we would do that periodically. So we might put it on, once every 2 weeks, even once it's got out in the field. So yeah, we'd apply a pesticide periodically. Again, just like with a fertilizer as well. So we might use things like on our fertilizer, we might use things where we'd take some, let's say, some stinger nettles, comfrey leaves. We'd use some whatever things we would use. We'd use some gosh, slips off the top of my head now. some. I want to say some Irish moss, but it's not Irish moss. It's another type of algae. It slips my head. But even with the stinging nettles, the comfrey leaves, you know, this is soaked in water. Some molasses as well. These type of things again, we'd take them and we'd spray onto our plants periodically also. Yeah.
I see.
You're really trying to just give those plants a good head start. But not only that, we'd want to also be looking to apply compost teas, like what we was talking about when Stephen's Church came down to the farm, both before you plant out and also, whilst the plant is there. Oh, sorry, whilst the plant is in the ground growing as well.
Mm-hmm. I see. And follow-up question to the pesticide is the pesticide good for slugs? And if not, I guess what do you use if that's not good for slugs?
On the point for slugs, I mean, look, this year was it was a really challenging year for slugs. Like I said, we had a pretty diabolical farming season this year. Most things that we sent out in about May and June were eaten by slugs. We often use landscape fabric, and we're transplant in the landscape fabric. But whilst the landscape fabric will mitigate certain weed pressure, and stop the weed from growing, it's a really cool place for slugs to thrive. They want to thrive anywhere where they can just kind of like be tucked away from the sun, right? In a damp area. And so we had a lot of trouble with slugs. Now, pesticides, on a small scale, obviously you can do certain things like with your salts. You've got different applications where you can use, even things like fizzy drinks, like things like beer, for instance, right? You can put in a glass and just dig out a little hole in that ground and place it in the ground, so it's the top of it is at ground level. But on a scale, that will attract the snails to the sugar content will attract the snail basically, and they'll fall into the beer, right? But on a scale of what we're doing, it's not really economically viable to take that option. So really and truly, what some of the things we employ, we make sure the grass is cut down extremely low, so that's surrounding the block. We will, because again, that's a habitat for slugs. If we're using a certain amount of compost on our ground, where the compost is quite dry, for some reason we've noticed the slugs don't really like that material. I don't know if it scratches them or what, but we when we employ a particular type of compost, that seems to act as a deterrent. Other than that, we also use something that's a natural pesticide for slugs. I think it's called Slux, SLUXX. Let me see if I could just find it here. And we'll just sprinkle that around the plant, around the plant as we've transplanted. Yeah. So it's called Slux with a SLUXX. So it's a natural. It only contains natural ingredients. It's like a natural phosphate basically. So again, that will deter the slugs from getting hold of your plants and really, making a feast off of all your hard efforts.
Mm. Yeah, I got another question about moving to the country. It's talking about should we be debt free should we be debt free living in the country? Basically, it's thinking about those who cannot afford to buy a house or a plot of land. in that context? Should they, I guess, borrow money, engage in debt to make that move to the country?
Okay, so that I mean that's a really good question. It's an interesting question, and obviously there's different takes on that, right? So I'll say from the outset, the answer I give doesn't necessarily mean that's the right answer for everyone. Now, it really it depends on some level as to what it is that you're going to embark upon. So let's say, for instance, now in our context, we acquired a mortgage to get the land to begin with before we could pay off that mortgage. Now if the only means you want to leave the city, you want to buy somewhere in the country, you might have to get a mortgage, and you're going to be thinking to yourself, well, look, if I have a mortgage, what's the chances of me being able to, maybe you just say as a ballpoint figure, I borrowed, I don't know, £150,000, £200,000. What's the chances of me being able to pay off that mortgage? We don't know when the Sunday law's going to break out, right? Now, going by what we're seeing, what the Bible's witness of, or witnesses pertaining to these tokens that's telling us that the crisis is at hand and soon approaching. We don't know. It could be a number of years, a few years. We don't know. I don't really want to get into time as such, but I mean, even if we just said, for argument's sake, it's in the next couple of years, the chances of you paying off a £200,000 mortgage in a couple of years, if you're not really entrepreneurial, is probably quite slim. Yeah, generally speaking, not impossible, but generally speaking, probably quite slim if you've not got a certain amount of funds already saved up. And if you have got those funds saved up, you're probably not going to be borrowing 200,000, as it were. So here's the thing now, right? Here's the thing. There's number one, sometimes we think to ourselves, if we've got our house mortgage free during a time of no buy and sell, we're going to be okay. Now, on some levels, yes, but let me ask you a question. How are you going to pay your council tax? How are you going to, with land, pay your, certain taxes that come on the land? You're still going to get council tax, especially if you're living there. There's still certain rates you might still have to pay. So there's still going to be certain things that you're going to find yourself, in a bind at some point in time. And obviously these things will escalate in as far as it goes with debts occurring until it gets to the court stage and court action, etc., etc. But look, generally speaking, we want to try and avoid debt as much as possible. I don't mind using debt when it comes to business. Yeah. Ellen White advocated even on that level there, you'd put out to get donations as much as possible. Then you'd borrow from brethren interest-free as much as possible. And beyond that, you then go and seek to get further borrowing if needs be, to get certain institutions moving forward, right? And the Lord opens up avenues by which that debt is then able to be satisfied. So again, would I go and get a mortgage to be able to move out of the city? Yes, I would. Yes, I would. But whilst I'm getting that mortgage, I'm also working on how am I able to, pay into that mortgage? How am I able to, develop some sort of skill set, or furthermore, can I network with others? Because really and truly, these are, serious questions that pose serious ramifications, right? And really and truly, this is where it comes back to, well, look, am I just looking and approaching this thing from, my own safety, when it's not just one person in Adventism that's seeking to move out of the city? Every Adventist should, I know it's not the case, but should really be looking to make those moves. And therefore, really and truly, if we was about, God's business in that wise, we would be networking, pulling our resources together. So whilst I might not necessarily have all the money to put into the pot, I might bring some other skills and necessary, tools to that equation that allows us to be able to move forward. So for instance, I might be a builder. You might have the finances and another person might have, other finances and so on and so forth. We come together, we get a large enough bit of land. We're able then to develop that land, even if it meant that we're then reselling that land to be able to make more money to then divide and be able to then get smaller pockets of land by which each one can then, set up their homestead. These are various different things that we should really be, considering as God's people. You'll find other sectors of society do these very things, but when it comes to, how we move forward, unfortunately, we're lagging miles and years behind in those necessary steps, in order for us to be able to make those expedient moves.
I see. Yeah. I hope that answers your question or gives you some guidance on the question. Is there any other questions that anyone has that they'd like to raise before we terminate our presentation for today, for this evening? Whilst they're thinking, one thing I wanted to ask is you talked about being a bridge between using the food as a bridge to reach Adventists, to get them onto thinking on a different spectrum, I guess, and to also be a bridge linking out to the unchurched individual, as it were. Do you have any testimony of how you've done both, how you are impacting both sets of people?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's one particular incident. There's one incident really with a person that lives in a local community. In fact, from when we was back in Brackley, he's quite a well-to-do person. He owned a race course. Yeah, not as grand as some of the race courses out there, but he had a race course on his land that they would actually have race meetings, and he had a number of activities taking place. He was quite a prominent person in the village, and he had an ulcer on his leg. He's quite a large person, probably in his late 60s, but dealing with him, when it comes to his ulcer, dealing with him when it comes to his diet, being able to minister unto his needs. Listen, we was able to really have really good conversations, and generally speaking, you moving out of the city and you go into one of these like little closely knit villages, you're the outsider. They've just got you a certain way. But the food is definitely a bridge builder. So, again, with another person more local to where we are now, one particular individual we started to interact with. They were conducting some raffle in the local village, and they asked if we've got anything, if we're able to contribute in any way. And we was able to bring forth a box of some nice hearty vegetation, and along with that, we gave them a complimentary box as well. And they came back and said, "My goodness me, we've never had garlic so potent, so tasty, and these greens that we're eating. How have you grown them? How have you done such and such?" And it allows us to then start to have those kind of conversations about nutrition, about the value of a plant-based diet, and eventually start to get onto the next level in regards to our faith. So we have a number of conversations with different individuals in the local community, and when fruit, 100% simply through the means of us growing food, and likewise even with those in the church, you know, you saw a kind of division during the time of the pandemic, right? You had people that were, and obviously I don't want to take the conversation into a certain road, but you had a side that was, you know, really into the vaccine and the mandates and everything that was being propagated by the powers that be, and the other side that, you know, wasn't really into that, yeah, and was looking at different things. Now, the mindset of, listen, I'm following the status quo, generally speaking, can sometimes be very cagey to those of us that might be a little bit more verbal on, you know, the signs of the times. And I've definitely got acquaintances within Adventism that, you know, was quite hostile to me, you know, in my early days of Adventism. But since we embarked on this whole Advent Farms adventure, right, and venture, you know, and we started to grow food, and some of the testimonies coming back from like the pumpkins we grow, saying that, you know, they're like sweet potatoes, you know, exceedingly dry and exceedingly sweet. And when we would, you know, word would get around, and, you know, those same individuals that might have been a little bit kind of cold with us, you know, started to order, and we'd do the delivery run to them, and over time, conversations would start to build. And no longer are they looking at us as, man, those guys are just, you know, those hardliners, those conservative bunch in Adventism. It's now, listen, we're able to really talk about certain things that before those conversations wouldn't really be able to exist. So 100%, there's, you know, it's not just a lip service thing. These things are actually, you know, real. Listen, we all need to eat, and you know, I've noticed it, man. Listen, one thing is, you know, listen, we only have to ask ourselves, how many of us have gone to shops that we might not necessarily really want to support, but because maybe there's a sale on, right, we find ourselves in those shops, supporting those shops. You know, how much more when you're actually dealing with real nutrition?
That's true. I've got one last question here, going back to the land again. The question is, would you suggest anyone purchasing land should make sure it has a building on it to avoid the various challenges in achieving planning permission?
Well, again, that's kind of like contextual in the sense of, yes, that's always the better option. But sometimes that option is only really viable if you live, you know, way up north, you know, or over in Wales or up in Scotland, because obviously the higher north you go, the further afield you go, the less expensive, you know, land is, right? But if you're talking about, let's just say from, it's probably a little bit higher than that, but let's just say from Birmingham going down to, you know, the southeast of the country, you know, Kent, etc., some parts of Kent, Surrey, and so on and so forth, land is very expensive with property. You know, I mean, it can be extremely expensive, right? Notwithstanding, we've been counseled that, you know, we are living in a time where people will start to give away property for little to nothing. So if you can, and you can go to auctions. There was a place near to us recently that was on the market. It was 4 acres of land with an agricultural barn with full planning permission to convert that barn into a property. So you've got those scenarios as well, you know, where you can find property. Or another one, and again, you know, I know time doesn't permit for us to really get into the depths of it, but these are the type of things that we really kind of go into a lot more detail on some of the workshops. So another thing that you might want to take into consideration when thinking about land and, man, how am I going to get to build, is the size of the land. So if you get 12 acres, you get certain development rights, certain permitted development rights. So once you're above 12 acres, you've got the development right to then go and build an agricultural barn. Now, that opens up a whole stream of options for you. You know, so for instance, as an example, in most situations, you are able to be sited on the land whilst the construction of the agricultural barn is in process, in building. And once you start that building, you have there's a possibility they might have scaled it back to 3 years at the time. That before it was 5 years. I can't remember whether or not that 3-year rule has come into effect as yet. But at the point in time a few years ago, it was you had up to 5 years to complete the process. So then you can actually live on that land. You might not be able to build a house directly on that land straight away, but let's say you're in a static caravan, you'll be able to be on that land for a duration of time. Now there are other variables involved that where this scenario does not work, yeah, but by and large you can get through this way. And so within that 5 years now, you're going to be working toward gaining, or meeting the other type of criteria that would allow for you now to actually build, a proper structure on that land.
I see. And
Yeah.
I got a follow-up question is when will you be running your workshops for next year?
So we intend, we're still in the planning stage, but we intend, and we're going to start advertising, in the upcoming, in the next several weeks. We intend to start those workshops from May and run them through to September. Yeah. So, like I said, we're going to be putting on these workshops, and these workshops, for Adventist brethren, we're going to be putting them on free of charge because we want to, make it as accessible as possible. They won't always remain free because we're a self-supporting ministry. So obviously, there will come a point in time when there will be a small price to pay on that. But generally speaking, we're looking to be able to make as accessible as possible the various different, skills that we need to attain to be able to move to the country and to be able to make some tangible preparation for that crisis. So again, we're going to be beginning our workshops from the May 2025 going through to September.
All right. Thank you very much. Oh, they're asking if they can register now.
Okay, so what individuals can do, and I'm glad someone just said that actually, because I need to make a point on that. With each workshop, there is a cap of numbers. Yeah. So obviously, the earlier people register, the more guaranteed they are to get their place. So what individuals can do right now before we open up a particular page on the website for you to enter your registration details is just to send us an email, and then we'll log that name, we'll log that date of when we receive that email, and then we'll be sure to put you, in the book of the registration. So again, the information I believe was on the screen. It's not there now, but it's info@adventfarms.org. So if you send your email over to info@adventfarms.org, we'll make sure that your spot is well secured.
I'm just going to put that in the chat so that if they missed the screenshot, they've got the email. So I've put the email in the chat so that everyone can see it, and hopefully later on the details from the screenshot will be in the description for the YouTube video with the email address. So it's info@adventfarms.org. Website is adventfarms.org.
Yes, that's right.
So yeah, if you're watching this at a later point in time, you can check out the website and get in contact, use the contact details that are on the website to reach out and connect and register your interest in the upcoming courses. Earl, I want to thank you so much for your time and what you shared with us. And we'll have to talk about when's feasible to get another session in, because it looks like from May onwards next year, you're definitely going to be flat out. I'm not sure how much time you have before you start preparing for the spring crops to do another session, but we'll talk and figure out when we can get another slot in to talk more on how would you go about setting up this your homestead? Looking at, we didn't touch on the alternative forms of capital like energy, water harvesting, and developing your food sources, and obviously the finances and all that kind of stuff. So it'd
Mm,
be good to cover some of those areas next time and yeah, get more into the nuts and bolts of operating a homestead, market garden, or some
definitely.
sort of business or venture that you can use to replace your dependence on your 9 to 5, your white collar job or something.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, definitely. Yeah, 100%. And it's been a, no, it's been a pleasure. And thank you for the invite as well. Being able to have the opportunity to, at least share these things and to use this platform now to let individuals know that hey, we're here in the UK. Again, making that accessibility more widely available.
Yeah,
So yeah, whenever you guys are ready, by the grace of God, we'll be able to accommodate.
excellent. Thank you very much. So our next session will be on I believe it's the 3rd of November, first Sunday of November will be our next session. Another story, another experience, another aspect of making that move to the country. Earl, would you like to sign us out with a word of prayer?
Sure. All right, let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, Lord, we are truly grateful, dear Father God, for the love that you continue to show unto your children, dear Lord. The avenues that you continue to open to make, Lord, the way accessible, Heavenly Father. There's some that, Lord, are looking and are hearing the various things that are being spoken and are thinking, how am I able to make that move from city to country? How am I able to make those necessary preparatory moves, dear Lord? But I just pray, dear Father God, that each one will have that faith, Lord, to put that first step forward, Lord. You've given us examples in your word whereby even at the crossing of the Red Sea, it would not depart unless the people began to put their foot forward, dear Lord. And so likewise, Heavenly Father, I pray that you'll continue to encourage our hearts. Help us, dear Heavenly Father, to recognize the signs of the times, but to not be slack concerning these things, Lord. A lot of us are comfortable in the lifestyles we have. And I just pray, dear Lord, that you'll help us to realize that there needs to be a shift, a paradigm shift in the way we think, the way we see things, dear Lord, that we may be able to, Lord, be a people that are peculiar, that are leading the way, that are a light to shine in a darkened place, dear Heavenly Father. That when individuals inquire, why are we living like this? Why are we doing that, Lord? We'll be able to give a reason for our faith. So, Lord, please continue to bless, Lord, the team that are spearheading this ministry of the Journey Planner. I pray that you'll continue to bless them and enlarging their borders, that they may be able to indeed continue to be a tool in your hand, bringing much light and hope to your people. So please bless each one of us to this end, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thanks again, Brother Earl.
Brother.
And thank you for joining us this evening. I trust you've been blessed as we've been blessed.
Definitely. Amen. Definitely. All right, brother. Take care now. God bless.
All right. Take care.
Thank you again for watching the Journey Planner SDA. Remember to subscribe, like, and share the links to our YouTube and Facebook broadcasts. See you at the next episode.